Welcome, folks. This is episode 6 of Walk the Talk. And we have a topic here today that I hope you'll find as interesting as we do. We want to talk today about some damaging myths that we hold that may not really serve either us or our children. And one of those myths that we thought would be interesting to explore is the myth of the belief that good parents should always prioritize their children's happiness above all else. And as we think about that, that's kind of intuitively, we think to ourselves, oh, our job has to be to make our children happy. And if our children are happy, we're going to be happy. And it is a very, very difficult assignment, and one that we should actually not take on. So what comes with that kind of thinking, which I think is nature for us as moms to think that, but what comes with that is expectations that actually are very, very difficult to deliver on and are difficult from so many different angles. But the fact that we're trying to control everything, if we think our job is to make our kids happy, then we're trying to control every aspect of their life in order for that to happen. And in controlling their lives, we have to control so much of our own lives that the whole thing becomes very, very complex. And what I want to speak to is a little bit of what happens in the teenage years. In the teenage years, we have so many things going on, and life is so complex because our kids are growing, they're developing, they're changing, and we're constantly trying to keep up with those changes. And if on top of that, we have the expectation that to be a good parent means that we've got to keep this child happy, that's going to be very difficult, because how are children ever going to grow and learn if the only aspect of their world that we want to show them is an aspect of happiness? It's not possible. We cannot deliver on that. So from the perspective of expectations, we need to be very careful what we expect and what we expect of ourselves. So, Marelise, I'm going to throw the ball to you.
Yeah, Isla, it's so true what you're saying, because I think a lot of parents gauge how good their parenting is based on the happiness they see in their children, which, of course, if you are doing this job properly, there are definitely going to be times where the children are not going to be happy with you, because that is the whole point. We need to lead and guide, which means everything that they need to do and that's good for them doesn't necessarily come naturally. So yes, I do think it sets everyone up for very unrealistic expectations. And please don't measure the effectiveness of your parenting against the reaction you see in your child. I think that's why it's so important for us to have a good idea of what we're doing, so that we can know I am doing the right thing regardless of what I'm seeing. So that definitely makes it a little bit easier. But then, of course, the second thing also on top of that is lack of boundaries. Because if you are going to prioritize the child's happiness above all, how are they going to learn boundaries and discipline and essential life skills like disappointments? I mean, that is such an important thing to learn to deal with, or not getting your way, or delayed gratification, which we know no child likes. I think most adults don't like that either. We live in a world that is so fast-paced, and you want to see the results quickly as you go through it. And I think that's just another area where we can really set ourselves up for disaster and our children up for disaster when we think that we need to keep them happy at all costs. That is not going to raise very good humans, responsible, loving, caring humans. And I mean, especially for small children, this is really crucial to help them see another person's point of view, or why it is so important for them to be able to do this and not that. But again, that is something that really presents itself mightily in the teenage years, right?
Yes, indeed. Um, and I think that boundaries are something that is so difficult for us as parents to work with, because what actually has to happen naturally is that we release the hold a little bit so that our teenagers have the opportunity to have their own learning, to make their own mistakes. So there's also the risk that if we're holding on too tight and we're trying to manage the expectation or manage the happiness or manage the outcome, they become either very dependent on us, or their expectations of how the world should run become so distorted that they're actually not going to be successful once we release them out into the big world. So we have to be consciously and constantly thinking about what boundaries are we putting in place? Where are we letting them negotiate some of those boundaries? How are we giving them a bit more independence? What is that independence going to lead to? It's a big work, actually, isn't it? I mean, it really is a heck of a lot of work.
It really is. And what I find, especially with the younger children, parents are exhausted, they are overwhelmed. They feel like, oh, there's a lot of time. Yes, my child's not handling it very well now, but there's time, they'll learn. But I think the way you set them up initially is half the battle won, in the sense that if you raise them right from the start to understand all these points that we are mentioning, as it is reinforced as they grow older, that every principle becomes more deeply entrenched. And that is why it's so important to start off with understanding this really well. Because as you said before, in the teenage years, it feels like they need to relearn everything yet again.
Yeah.
But the thing is, then that's just going to be confirmation of everything that they learned before. So again, it's like every habit that you're trying to instill, the more it's reinforced, the more you just go back to the same principles every time, the more you can be sure that they're actually going to get this. And so it's very true what you say. It's we must never underestimate the power of that. Yeah.
Are you a parent that is aware that you're of taking care of yourself as well? Because when we put our kids' happiness, or we focus too much on our children to the detriment of ourselves or our other relationships, the risk then is that we are not the whole WHOLE people that we need to be in order to be good parents. And I think that in a lot of cases, and I will certainly say I did it myself, where I put the kids in so many situations before me, and before what I knew was sort of best for me. And I think that we all as parents need to kind of come back and revisit that discussion a little bit more for ourselves, where we have a society that is now talking about entitled kids, but what is that entitlement? Where does it come from? What have we done or not done as parents that it has created a situation where the kids automatically put themselves at the center of the universe because we put them there, and we never pulled back and said, well, actually, as the research says, when mom's okay, kids are fine. And in a lot of cases now, mom is not okay.
And it's so key what you're saying, because very essential tools like emotional intelligence, resilience, all those things, this is where it actually starts. If they are going to learn that, I am the priority, how are they going to learn all these essential life skills that we know as they get older and the more they encounter are key to not only their survival, but their happiness going forward, and how they're going to relate to people, and how they are going to build relationships in their lives, everything around that. So we are really not doing them any favors by creating that expectation that their happiness should always go first.
Mhm. Yes,
We-
yes.
Yeah.
It'll just that will snowball.
Oh, it's
The
guaranteed.
older the kids become,
Mm,
it snowballs
mm,
because as they get older, so does life. The reality of life
mm,
show up,
mm,
and I think as you say, taking the perspective of this is we're in this for years.
mm,
We can't just say everything seems to be okay now and we'll
mm,
get to it
mm,
later, because later, if you're only getting to it later, it becomes increasingly difficult because you've already trained your
yes,
children to see the world through one lens, and the one
yes,
lens is their happiness. What's
mm,
best for me? What's best
mm,
for my life? And
mm,
then they start to criticize and they judge, and everything is viewed through the lens of, well, you're not giving me what I need. You're not
mm,
delivering, mom.
mm,
You did for years, and suddenly you've
mm.
changed it all up. Very difficult at that point.
And that's very stressful for the parents. I speak to many parents that are exhausted and absolutely at their wits' end because they are trying everything they can think of, and they are just not getting the reaction that they need, and they are killing themselves to try and coax their kids into being more happy. And actually, it's guaranteed to have the opposite effect, and in the process, it is killing everything inside the parent. So at the end of the day, you're going to sit with very unhappy parents and unhappy children. And to be honest with you, when I got the bonus kids, I decided, okay, well, I've stepped into this now and they've been through a lot. So everything must just be perfect for them. And it created such a void in me that eventually I took out my frustrations on them. But I was the one who set those priorities, who determined that I will do whatever it takes. And then when they didn't give me the response that I needed, I was finished. I couldn't carry on. And it's like, that famous thing of, after everything I did for you, this is the reaction I get. And
Yeah,
that's that it's a given. It's bound to happen if this is the route that you choose.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the scary thing. It's actually guaranteed. And yet so many of us still think, no, it would be different with me. It's it's a mother
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think the other thing is, as we're maturing as human beings, we're living our lives, which is helping us understand that things are not as easy as we may have thought that they would be. Just like you and I getting together today,
Mm.
as a crazy example of
Yes,
how life just doesn't show up for you in exactly the way that you have it planned. So you
absolutely.
adapt. You're
Mm.
flexible. You figure out how can we do it and how can we get it done differently. And I think that teaching those skills is so crucial to our children eventually finding their way to their own happiness,
Mm.
because they understand I'm creating it as I go.
Mm.
It's not, I'm not depending on mom or dad to do it for me
Or the rest of the world. Mm.
or the rest of the world. Yeah,
Mm. Mm.
I'm learning as I go that, one, I can't always be happy. That's not possible. That I have emotions, I've got to manage them, I've got to learn them, and
Mm.
I've got to learn how to navigate all of this.
Mm.
So putting an expectation out there for a parent to say, I'm going to be happy when you're happy, that's going to be a very, very, very tough road for a
Mm.
parent to walk.
Mm. And I think we are good examples because the only way that we learned this is by not getting our way and learning to innovate and improvise in the moment and not make it about me. Which I think is a very important other thing is when you think that it's all about you, you are definitely setting yourself up for disaster. But then also, how do you view the world if the whole world is not bowing to your presence at every turn? I think to take a child in any given moment, good or bad, and say, did you see what happened here? Did you see why this works for you or why this doesn't work for you? Do you know that when you don't like the outcome, you actually have the power to do something about it? Do you know that when you are finding yourself in this kind of situation, you've got all these options available to you. And if you choose the one that aligns with you best, that sits well with you, you are going to be happy in the situation. You're going to make other people happy in the situation. And there are so many examples you can mention here. But the thing is, what I think is the most important thing for us to realize is, remember, children are going to model what they see right from the start through their lives. I am still doing things today at my ripe age that my mom used to do. Why? Because from the moment my brain kicked in, this is what I saw every day. I mean, there are literally things that irritate me about myself because it's exactly what my mom used to do, and it irritated me back then. And what that shows me is, oh my gosh, we really learn by what is modeled to us. Even if you've got all the book knowledge, you've done all the courses, you've experienced life for yourself, there are still things that you involuntarily go back to, because at a critical time in your life, this is what you learned by association. So to say that it's empowering to not always have to put them first for yourself and for your child.
Yeah.
Explaining to them why it's actually empowering and it's not a negative if you don't see what you want to see. And then modeling that, I think, are definitely two key things that will make every parent-child relationship a lot better if you can get those two things right.
Yeah.
Mm.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Emotions are something that every single one of us has. It's about being human. We need to help our kids feel those emotions, know what
Yes.
they are, and
Mm.
know how to live with them and how to handle them and how to manage them.
Mm.
And I think that when we do that, then we'll take a lot of the pressure off of ourselves. Because if we see that as a teaching moment, a growing moment, a learning moment, instead of somehow failure on our part to deliver on some aspect of what we think parenting is supposed to be, I think everybody would be a lot happier.
I know. And one thing that I just want to mention here is, parents have said to me, oh, I don't have time to have the whole discussion when we're going through this. If my child is unhappy in that moment, I would rather just pop an ice cream in their mouth or something, just, get through the moment. I don't have time to. But the thing is, if you do it correctly once or twice, right from the start, you won't have to consistently do that again.
Yeah.
You won't have to repeat the same process all the time. Once that foundation is laid, and you can just maybe build on it from time to time and use new examples of what they are going through to reinforce the same principle, you are actually saving a lot of time and drama and unnecessary emotions. So that's important to mention, because time is something that everyone says they don't have enough of. But if you just spend that time from the start wisely, you are actually going to spend less time on reinforcing this thing throughout. So take a moment right from the start. And I just want to say, like when I was trying to spare my child the reality of my frustration, I got back from work, I was tired, I was so irritated with something that happened at work, whatever. And while we were driving in the car, he was carrying on about his day, and my answers were very short. I had a brainwave, and I'm so grateful for it. In that moment, I realized, wow, as much as I really don't feel like this now, I know this is a key. So in that moment, I said, you know what, let's just stop the bus here for a moment. You've had a bad day. You are not, you are just, you want to let trip. I've had a bad day. It's actually going to, be a lot easier for us to just go and find something nice now that will just put our minds at ease. But what about we just shout out our frustrations now, deal with it right here, and then the rest of the evening is actually going to be a pleasure. And he's like, wow, so what does that mean? I said, let trip, go, get it all out. Then I'm going to tell you why I'm frustrated. You're going to know I'm not frustrated with you. I'm going to know you're not frustrated with me. It was just a bad day. Let's just call it what it was. Put it to bed and have a wonderful evening. And it was such a turning point. And that really cemented that idea for me. And after that, of course, there were more bad days. There were more things. And he remembered that moment. And he said, Mom, let's just get it out. Let's just understand that it's not us. And let's have a good evening. And that became our thing. I cannot tell you how much that helped. And that's not denying what we were dealing with. That is not being mad at the world because this is not something that we want to be forced to deal with right now. This is just saying, this is real. This is life. It's going to happen. But we can change that and we can make it better for each other. And I think that was a real victory moment. And we still do this. And this is 10 years later. So it helps. Yeah.
We learn from doing, right?
We really
learn
do.
from doing. Yeah.
And it's okay if you don't get it right.
Exactly. I was going to say, I think giving yourself permission to not get it right, to somehow kind of go, well, maybe I'll be a little bit creative here. Maybe I'll kind of be out of the box. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think just not being quite so serious, not taking everything quite so seriously really helps. Okay, any closing words?
Every day matters, but that doesn't mean you have to be perfect.
I love that. I think that's actually a perfect place to close, because we concede all these ideas as parents all the time. And if we see ourselves as a gardener,
yes,
nothing's ever going to be perfect. It's always a work in progress, right? It's always a work in progress. So in closing, I want to encourage our audience here to bring us more questions, to comment. You're going to find us on YouTube, but you'll also find us on Facebook and on Instagram. And we look forward to our next conversation, hopefully next week. Weather and location and some of these other interesting challenges that we have will all conspire to have us not in the same place, on the same internet connection at the same time.
That'll be amazing. No flooding, no trees falling, no houses burnt. Yeah, just joy and peace. Thank you, Isla. Love speaking.
Thank you, Marelise.
Have a great week. Bye.